So a decade ago, there was supposed to be a video game called 6 Days in Fallujah that was released. It was about the Marines and the Iraqi, well, I don't know if I could call them the Iraqi military, but Iraqi people that were helping the Marines go through Fallujah. It was the second Battle of Fallujah, and it was about the Marines going door to door, breaching and clearing, and it's about the individual Marines. And the other day, I was reading this comment thread by this one dude that said that even though the intention of the video game was not to be political, it's still pretty political. And that's people talking about the Iraq War itself and not what the video game is trying to represent as the individual Marine and soldiers. And there's also another thing that I really didn't think was absolutely necessary, but it was a thing in this comment thread. This individual wanted to know from the Iraqi perspective, kind of like what Clint Eastwood did with Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Flags of Our Fathers we saw from the American Marine perspective, and Letters from Iwo Jima we saw from the Japanese Imperial perspective. This guy wanted something like that. He wanted to see through the perspective of the Iraqi Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and insurgents that were doing their business in Fallujah, subjugating the city to their rule. So I decided to ask my dad, who was a OIF and Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom vet. I asked him, is he at all interested in seeing the perspective from the enemy side? The answer was no. He was not at all interested in seeing it from the enemy combatant side. He was only interested, if at all, learning from the Iraqi side of things was the civilian population that was subject to Al-Qaeda for a time. He didn't at all care about the enemy perspective. He told me he knew what their enemy perspective was, and that was to kill him. There's also this other side that people think that the Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters were local and indigenous to Iraq. They weren't. They were from other part of the Islamic world in the Middle East and Africa that, well, for the most part, were peaceful and had nothing to do with the Iraq War. In fact, I'm going to splice in some clips here so you guys can see what I'm talking about.
Sir, get a load of this. They look like Iraqi regulars. Looks like he could have been a college student. Good. He's a Syrian pound. Syrian passport. Ahmed Al-Zari, born in Damascus, age 26, entered Iraq March 23. 3 days after we came. His address in Iraq is the Palestine Hotel in Baghdad. Restaurant is 2-star, but room service is out of this world. And if you go around the corner, there's a club where the ladies go. Just say you are a friend of Uday's. What does the rest of it say? Purpose for entering Iraq. He put jihad as passport control.
So not all of the insurgents that were in Iraq were local to Iraq. And a lot of them were foreigners to Iraq, but still, Muslim, Islamic, and country of origin, or at least in, local regions at least. The people that were fighting in Iraq, not all of them were Iraqis. The Marines got into some gunfighting with Republican Guard and Iraqi military, but the insurgents, the ones who weren't local to the country of Iraq, came from other parts of the Middle East and Islamic world. In Iraq, you had many different people coming to Iraq from many different countries to fight, well, not for Iraq, but against the Americans, solely against the Americans. And that was it. You're not going to get a clear, consistent perspective because for the Marines, their perspective were they're war fighters, they're meat eaters, they're there to kill, they're there to, get rid of the enemy, to bring stability to the region, whatever you want to call it. All right, whether it's political or not, that's what they're there for. They are there to eat meat, and get shit done. Meanwhile, you got guys from different parts of the Islamic world coming to one country just to fight Americans and do a pretty bad job at it. Most of them were young. And the only country that I can imagine where most of the insurgents there were actually local was probably Afghanistan. And that probably is about it. Anyways, this video was brief and short. I hope you guys didn't mind this type of video. But later on in the year, I am going to have some very interesting stuff for you guys. Actual really cool stuff. That is if our constitutional rights haven't been completely corroded.
We can tell you our stories. We can show you our scars. But some moments must be experienced.